So when the marathon reached the end of the Hartnell era, I don't know why, but something compelled me to do the video where I discussed the First Doctor, dressed as the First Doctor. And then I felt like I'd made my bed and I had to lie in it. Now, I am not a cosplayer. Before this, I'd never cosplayed before, never really interested me, and now I've made a rod for my own back. I had to do it for the Troughton one, and now it won't have escaped your notice that we're here at the end of the Pertwee era. And so I guess whether or not I am happy with the cosplays, I have to do it. So, Third Doctor outfit reveal in 3, 2, 1. Hi! Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me between Doctors to pause and reflect on the third. I was only 3 when Patrick Troughton died, and still yet to discover Doctor Who at all, but Jon Pertwee, I remember him vividly as a personality. He'd quit being the Doctor by the time I was born by a decade, anniversary appearance notwithstanding, but when little Chris, was getting into Doctor Who, he sort of like loomed large. He was still around and seemingly fully engaged with the Doctor Who bandwagon, such as it was at the time. It's very, very easy to write off Dimensions in Time because it is so utterly, utterly terrible. But one of the biggest thrills I got as a young Doctor Who fan, fully aware of its status as a has-been TV show because I was the only kid at school still interested in it and its vast back catalogue, was when, on Children in Need, Jon Pertwee as the Third Doctor turned up at Noel Edmonds' door in Crinkly Bottom. I had met his Doctor on a couple of occasions as I was beginning to acquaint myself with all that I'd missed, but here he was in new material. I was over the moon. As a youngster in the early 90s, I thought of Jon Pertwee slightly differently from all the other Doctors. Without sounding disrespectful, I thought of William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton as dead, because they were. Tom Baker's then current form was also slightly out of reach. He was on Medics, which I wasn't allowed to watch, and his interviews from the 30th anniversary documentary were archive footage. So I did know what he looked like from Medics trailers and his brief thing in Dimensions in Time, but it still didn't feel all that accessible. He was an unknown quantity. And as lovely as they are, Peter Davison, Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy all looked relatively similar, if not exactly the same, as they did when I'd seen them as the Doctor. And also, I don't know whether or not, even as a child, their overtly stylised costumes made that feel like they were actors playing a part. Pertwee, on the other hand, well, he always seemed to be in costume, and if he didn't seem to be in character, he wasn't that far removed from how he had played the Doctor. I thought of all of the other actors as people who had played the Doctor, but I had a really sneaking suspicion when I was a kid that Pertwee always was the Doctor. As I grew older, I may not have been as enamoured with his portrayal as some of the others, but there is one thing I became increasingly aware of, and that was his very potent confidence in the role. Even watching him now on this marathon, I can't really deny that his debut in the role is the most assured so far, perhaps of all the Doctors. He strides into a show with an uncertain future and a shaky recent past to play a character already made a success by 2 men, and none of it looks like it phases him. He was famously instructed to play the Doctor as Jon Pertwee, and he famously questioned, "Who in the hell is that?" The thing is, judging by his stature and his command of the role, you'd think he knew full well the answer to that question. Season 7 rings a lot of changes, but the fact that they all work as well as they do is due in no small part to the fact that the show tells you to accept them rather than asking you to. And a similar thing is true of Jon Pertwee's Doctor. He doesn't ask you to accept him. He in no uncertain terms tells you that's how it is now. As an approach, it works fantastically, and it makes for a stellar debut both for the new version of the show and for him. No longer does the Doctor react in fear to the monsters and the aliens. No longer does he instantly begin working out how to defeat them. No. Instead, he offers a hand of friendship to them. He may be more authoritative and he may be more formidable a presence, but the Third Doctor comes with that wonderful enthusiasm and benevolence which became so synonymous with the character. Here's the rub though. From such an auspicious beginning, where can things go? Well, it's safe to say that I thought things went a bit pear-shaped in Season 8 when it came to the Doctor's characterisation. At times, abrasively unfriendly and patronising to his new assistant Jo, and certain others around him, enough to make me wonder where the Doctor who reserved his ire and short temper for worthy targets had gone. There are moments in Pertwee's second season which serve to kind of dent my affection for the character that he was playing, and as a knock-on effect, it did affect my enjoyment of some of the stories. Things picked up, thankfully, as we went on, and he and Jo became probably the best TARDIS team so far. The chemistry between Pertwee's Doctor and Jo is just phenomenal when it gets going, and more importantly, when the Doctor stops being quite so brusque with her. While he may have smoothed out these elements of his performance as he went on, they were so noticeable when they occurred in Season 8 that I found they cast a bit of a shadow. Not over the rest of his run completely, but, you know, for a bit. And this is a shame, and it doesn't mean that I can't see just what a good performer Pertwee was, because believe me, I can, and he was brilliant. And there are definitely facets to his Doctor that I really approve of. Hartnell's Doctor, once he mellowed, made mention of the fact that he never took a life unless his own was in danger, and how he didn't really care for violence. But Pertwee's Doctor, while I guess thought of as a bit more rough and tumble, it did always feel like out of necessity, and I would say that Pertwee's Doctor truly felt like he was always on a crusade for peace. I mean, except when he's gunning down Ogrons, of course. And much has been made over the years of his apparently being the Tory Doctor. Now, I've chimed in on this debate countless times over the years, mainly just to say I think it's absolute nonsense. Of the three Doctors so far, for me, he's easily the most liberal. Sure, not afraid to occasionally make his point with his Venusian Aikido, but his disdain for the military mind and legions of narrow-minded, jumped-up bureaucratic men of power and influence mark out exactly where he stands. Is it because he likes cheese and wine? Is that why people think he's a Tory? Because it doesn't make him one. Makes him a bit of a snob, maybe. And sure, maybe sometimes on occasion that leads to him being a bit of a git, but on other times, and more so, it leads to him being quite endearing. And just as eccentric as you would expect the Doctor to be. But what it doesn't make him is true blue. Unless that just refers to his penchant for Stilton. But I must stress, even though I did make reference to the fact that there were moments in Season 8 where it looked like I may go off the Third Doctor, I don't want anyone to think that that means I have, or that I don't like the Third Doctor. Historically, I never was a fan of the Third Doctor, but in recent years, not just on this marathon, although this marathon has been the most I have ever enjoyed the Third Doctor, but in recent years I definitely have come around, and in all seriousness, I don't dislike any of the Doctors. That's not how this works. Just because he's not like right up at the top of my favourites doesn't mean I don't care for him, because I do a great deal. And I'd say that his last 3 seasons, he's pretty much ideal. As the show gets given a new lease of life after giving the Doctor his freedom back, Pertwee seems delighted with the new wider scope the show has, and he relishes the opportunity. By the end of his time, he's on form well enough to have built real and believable and even touching friendships with 2 leading ladies, although his signature companion will always be, quite rightly, Jo Grant. So yes, he is another good Doctor. Heck, he is a great Doctor. 3 for 3, we might say. And now, because we've had 3 of them, I do feel, because previously I have felt slightly uncomfortable, sort of like the issue of preference begins to creep in, doesn't it? And I didn't really want to do a ranking of 2 Doctors. Likewise, 3 seems there's not many, but from this point on in these videos I will start doing an ongoing ranking the Doctors list. So obviously regular viewers will probably have a guess at what it is, but here we go. Number 3, Jon Pertwee. Number 2, William Hartnell. And number 1, Patrick Troughton. So 3rd place, but honestly, believe me, a respectable one. It's only by default. That is a list of 3 fantastic leading men with fantastic versions of the Doctor. And yes, maybe I was underwhelmed by his, final 3 stories, his final run of stories, and I didn't feel like they were as befitting a goodbye as a Doctor that great deserved. But maybe that's because ever since I was a child, I had always thought of Jon Pertwee as the Doctor. I mean, really, as the Doctor. And sure, I am old enough to know better now, but because of how I felt about him as a kid, whenever I watch Planet of the Spiders, I do feel like the Doctor has died. So, farewell, Jon. We may not have always seen completely eye to eye, definitely not in Season 8, but your shining moments meant that I never, ever, ever lost respect for you. You commanded the role and the show, and sometimes you weren't even trying. You remoulded the part into something very different from that which had come before, and something which I honestly don't think anybody's really done with it since. You added new avenues to the Doctor, which many of your successors have explored in your wake, and you managed, while being the most physical of Doctors, to highlight the liberal, tolerant and decent tendencies of the character and the show. You can't really move for posts and videos claiming that Doctor Who is no place for politics. Heck, I think even this channel has attracted some comments of that ilk. But the thing is, there was politics all over Jon Pertwee's time in the show, and a lot of them of the social kind. In which case, Doctor Who is precisely the place for politics, and it was under Jon Pertwee's time at the helm that showed us that. It's emotional leaving a Doctor behind, but it's always incredibly exciting meeting a new one. So, lay on, Tom. Let's see what you got. Wordlessly, yet screaming with emotion and pathos, sauntering to Bessie, somberly gazing ahead before turning the ignition and driving off before a backdrop of a beautiful sunset after saying goodbye to perhaps the best friend he's ever had. So yeah, still not a cosplayer. I only ever do it for these videos, which is why they're always a little bit shonky. But for this one, for Pertwee's Doctor, ideally, I really would have loved to have tried for his Planet of the Daleks outfit, or at least like Planet of the Spiders or Invasion of the Dinosaurs or Time Warrior, something like that. But I guess like budget and time meant I went for something a little bit easier. I feel like his Season 7 outfit is sort of like the easiest one to do, certainly for me. So, as ever, I'll run through. So the wig was, I think, the most expensive wig of the 3 so far. This was 20 quid. The jacket, it should be a velvet one, and I did try and source one because I was going to try for another one of his outfits, but I couldn't really justify forking out how much they were going for, so I just used my black jacket that I already owned. The frilly shirt was 16 quid. That's a little bit too thin. It's the one I used for Hartnell, but I thought I could reuse it again. I can't remember how much that cost, but for the purposes of this costume, nothing, because I already owned it. And the cape was literally a tenner. And I can't remember what the totals of the other ones were, so I can't work out whether or not this was the most expensive or not. But it's the one I had to go for, Season 7. So if you were expecting one of his nicer, frillier, velvety numbers, I am very sorry. I've got a little bit more time to plan the 4th Doctor one. Obviously, there's a bit of it already behind me, I guess, but imagine if I just leave that there and I go for the Season 18 costume. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We've got plenty of time with the 4th Doctor before we even have to think about that. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this praising of Pertwee, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and spread the word. It'd be great to get as many people along for the marathon as possible. And what are your thoughts on the 3rd Doctor? Is he the very best there was, or can he not hold a candle to his predecessors? Is his era on the show the most defining one for you, or did its earthbound setting make it a little bit too samey? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a brand new era. So, if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and we'll ponder the question, why is a mouse when it spins?